Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Hash, where we bring you the latest and greatest in crypto and culture. My name is Naomi Brockwell, and today we have the awesome threesome back. We have Jen Sanasi, Will Foxley, and myself, and we are bringing all the news to you the day before Thanksgiving, and then we're going to take a couple of days off to be very thankful and pardon some turkeys. So let's dive straight into crypto now. Will, I'm going to hand it straight off to you. What is the IMF saying now?
I just want to make a note that the pumpkin has not left. So whoever was in the chat yesterday hating on it, it's not leaving till at least Friday. Just take a little side note there.
Yeah, you stand that ground,
That's
Will.
fair.
Right there. It's staying there till at least Friday. So whoever said that, just remember. IMF and Bitcoin. So last week we saw that El Salvador has issued a Bitcoin bond, or at least they're raising funds for it. That was in partnership with Blockstream, which is a Bitcoin company. They're raising $1 billion to make a Bitcoin city in El Salvador. The IMF came out on Monday with this new release saying, hey, we don't like that you guys are really using Bitcoin as legal tender. And also, we have a lot of concerns about that bond that you're issuing. So in this paper, the IMF does its yearly reviews of all the countries that it's involved with, that it's giving money to kind of help with economic development. They're saying, hey, like this Bitcoin development is not something that we want to be a part of. You guys should not be using Bitcoin as a legal tender. Furthermore, you should not be subsidizing Chivo, which is this Bitcoin wallet that the El Salvadorian state has been sponsoring. So pretty interesting to see them kind of come out, lobby hard against this Bitcoin development in El Salvador. IMF obviously is a huge global banking aid partner set up between the US, Europe, and other partners like after World War II. Now they're going after Bitcoin. Naomi, I want to throw this up over to you. We talked about this last week with the Bitcoin bond that Blockstream and El Salvador were issuing. We were kind of scratching our heads over like the logistics and the economics of it. Now IMF is also asking questions, and I don't like being on the side of the IMF, and I'm guessing you don't either.
I don't either. I mean, I am not on the side of Bukele either. Everyone who's like fangirling and fanboying Bukele, I'm not really part of that scene, even though I am interested, obviously, in the proliferation of Bitcoin across the world. I think that could be done voluntarily, though. I mean, regarding the IMF, this isn't the first time that they've cautioned against a nation that's been exploring cryptocurrencies. So 2018, they told Marshall Islands not to use crypto, and it was very like passive aggressive, threatening tones. So they said at the time that, you know, they had fears over its dependence on external aid and the threat of natural disasters in the region, and that, you know, using cryptocurrency could undermine this aid that they're getting. It's basically saying, like, if you adopt a cryptocurrency as your legal tender, then you will stop getting aid from us. So it's, I mean, they definitely do hold the purse strings to a lot of these countries. So they do get to dictate policy for them. It's like a strange situation. It's not just IMF, it's also FATF. I mean, we think of these organizations that like we never elected in, and yet somehow they get to control a lot of our lives. FATF is another one. And it's the Financial Action Task Force. And they've like threatened Malta before. It was like Malta was kind of heading towards being this crypto mecca of the world. And then there were rumors that, you know, FATF was going to graylist them because of their involvement with cryptocurrency. And then Malta just kind of walked back all their policies. And again, it's like these organizations that no one elects in, and they just put out these threats. And because they have this kind of network of member states, they're able to use a lot of leverage to force their position and to, coerce other countries into following their policies without technically having teeth. It's just a recommendation agency, but it ends up having quite a lot of teeth. So what's going on in El Salvador, it is interesting that now they're starting to come down. I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier. I'm surprised that we weren't hearing a lot of stuff about this, and I'm surprised that El Salvador is able to kind of experiment with this new monetary policy and move away from US dollar, because they definitely don't like experimentation. But I'll throw it to you, Jen, for your take on all this.
Yeah, I mean, we've come so far into the experiment. I really just want to see how this plays out. I think both Bukele and the IMF have their own interests in reshaping the El Salvador economy, and so this. surprising to me. But the IMF really doesn't, I mean, Naomi, you spoke about it, doesn't have a great track record. And Will, I'm wondering, can give us a little history lesson, a little background in the IMF's relationship with El Salvador?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit more to like the IMF in general than necessarily like the relationship between the IMF and El Salvador. The IMF is just created with the World Bank as a means of kind of like moving money from developed nations to less developed nations and propping them up by giving them loans. But in order to give those loans, you have to meet certain criteria. And the IMF sends advisors and they send kind of like central planners to those countries, say like, hey, here's your budget. This is the loan we can give you. This is the economic development that we want to see happening. And they've been doing this for, 5 decades at this point, maybe even a little bit longer. And it really just came out of World War II and the push for developing a lot of these countries in Africa, Central America, South America, and elsewhere. A lot of critics out there have pointed out that the IMF, the World Bank, kind of use these purse strings to change the policies of these small countries. And when it comes down to it, it's the IMF is run by countries like the United States and by countries in Western Europe, which means that we just have like more control of these developed nations over these underdeveloped nations. And that's a key point that the Bukele regime has been making here, is that you have the US and you have other larger global superpowers using this money bag to kind of choose what Bitcoin standard or what kind of monetary standard the El Salvadorian people use, which of course is just vastly unfair. They're a sovereign nation. They should be able to use whatever kind of monetary system they want. But Naomi, I'll give it to you for final thoughts and next subject.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see everything playing out in El Salvador. On the one hand, we have this head of state who's calling the shots, and we're not used to that. We're used to sort of grassroots movements, but we have this head of state who's like, we're pursuing Bitcoin. And I tend to not really be on the same side as head of states a lot of time as well. But now we have this head of state versus IMF. Like, it's very interesting how the dynamics of the world are really shifting. You've got these tectonic plates that are like crossing over, and like there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on that I'm sure none of us expected. And it's very interesting to see all of that get
really
mixed
quick.
up. Yeah.
Really quick, I want to jump back to the Bitcoin bond that we talked about last week. I saw Samson Mao's, the CSO of Blockstream, talking about it on Bloomberg. And he had made a really good case for why it's a good financial tool. And I only bring it up because last week we were critiquing it on the stream, talking about like why it might not be a good tool for people getting invested into Bitcoin. But it does make sense on one level. If you want to be a corporation that can't hold Bitcoin on a balance sheet but can hold bonds, well, you can just purchase this. And it acts as a proxy for Bitcoin. So I think that's also an interesting part about this, is that this Bitcoin bond came out right when the IMF was stating that it's not in favor of all the Bitcoin maneuvers that Bukele has been making. And it seems to be like escalating a lot going into the Christmas season.
Yeah. Well, let's change track here and talk about what's going on in the spy world. So an interesting development to come out of the Israeli spyware maker, the NSO group. We've talked about them on the show before. We've talked about how there was this big scandal where you had this Pegasus software that was being used to target individuals, and the companies saying, well, it's just used to target bad people and we only sell it to really nice people. And it turns out that's not the case, and it was being used to target journalists and activists and dissidents, and being sold to a lot of really bad countries that don't have great human rights records. And now Apple is pushing back. They're saying that they're going to sue the spyware maker. They're seeking to block its access to iPhones. Basically, they want to put laws in place that will stop NSO from ever using Apple's software for their services. An interesting development. There's a lot to unpack here, because I know we talk a lot about like blanket surveillance, mass surveillance. That's quite different from targeted surveillance. Targeted surveillance, I think, if you want to catch a really, really bad person, targeted surveillance is the way to do it. The fact is that at the moment we have this dragnet capture of everyone's data, and it doesn't matter if you're innocent, all this stuff's being collected about people. There's no warrants associated with it. It's terrible. And it's in this permanent database stored forever attached to our identities. So that's kind of what a lot of people in the privacy community push back against, rather than this targeted aspect. But Apple is pushing back on the targeted aspect, because they said NSO Group just can't be trusted. They've been selling this to really bad people. They've been using using it for really bad reasons, and they don't want NSO to have access to any Apple devices anymore. So interesting to see what's going to happen through this. I'll throw it to the group for your thoughts so we can dig into it some more. But Jen, what's your thought on all of this?
Yeah, I want to bring up a quote from the story. So an NSO representative said that pedophiles and terrorists can freely operate in technological safe havens, and they provide governments the lawful tools to fight that. And that just comes back to this narrative that we speak about so much on the show. When we talk about surveillance, these companies like, we're targeting the pedophiles. But Apple had a very similar narrative when they launched their surveillance software that was going to go through your iCloud content and search through your photos for child pornography or evidence of child sexual abuse. So I thought that was really interesting. I always wonder what the real intentions are behind some of these lawsuits. And I hope that Apple's are genuine, but I do just want to flag that they had a surveillance product that they launched. I think they launched it, or they were talking about launching it.
They walked that back.
Did they walk it back? Okay.
Yeah.
So they did walk it back. I just also wonder about their intentions. I hope that they are, genuine, but Will, I'll pass it up to you.
Yeah, just kind of taking a step back. It's interesting and fascinating to see teams like Apple, who are just best known for having like these very simple products that work and like sleek design, simple stuff like that. They're operating this whole other world where they're fighting people who are trying to use spyware technology on their applications. Like, this is something that normal retail investor would never interface with. They wouldn't know about it, but Apple is working on their behalf to try to figure this out. But to Jen, your point, I hadn't even thought about that the fact that Apple would prefer to do its own surveillance and not have it outsourced by a competing company coming in and taking it over in some sort of sense. And that's, in essence, kind of what a lawsuit would be able to do. Say like, hey, you can't like invade our software. This is our software. If someone's going to do this, it's going to be us. And I think to Naomi's point earlier, like, there is a lot of surveillance applications out there, and this has been a huge headline over and over again during the year. I wish Ben was on the show to kind of talk about this right now, but there's been a lot of instances where, Ben, shout out to you. There's been a lot of instances this year where these spyware applications have been used by foreign governments to track down and hurt people. And in the case of the Saudi journalist who died, I think in 2019, that was even like the repercussions for that tracking software were death for somebody. So definitely like huge stakes on the line, even though somebody just, like, most people aren't interfacing with this. They know about an iPhone and they know about Macs, but they don't know what's all going behind the scenes with like this spyware stuff. Maybe I'll throw it up to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just a few caveats about Apple's spyware. The way that they ran it, or the way that they proposed to run it, I mean, first of all, it was pretty opaque at the start, as everything with Apple is, but details eventually came out that it was understood that this would all be happening client side, which is very different from data being sent off phone and being, sort of sifted through in a centralized database where they have access to it all. The idea was that it would be sifted through on your device and on like servers where your stuff already existed, so like iCloud. And if it was on the device, then only like a hash would be sent out, and so people wouldn't be looking at your actual photos. It would be a hash, but it was so problematic. There were all kinds of issues with this. For example, like there were all kinds of mistakes that could be made with these hashes. You could have a hash that looks nothing like child porn, but it would be triggered as this is a child porn image, and it would just be like a picture of static. Because that's the weird thing about AI, is that sometimes it's just like way out in left field, and sometimes it's not great at actually identifying things. But I will just say that Apple has been fantastic for privacy and bringing it to the mainstream, because it's one thing to tell someone, like, in order to have absolute privacy, you need to download a Linux kernel, you could be running command line code, and you need to, have a Faraday cage around your house. And like, people get privacy fatigue. And what Apple did was they brought it to the masses. They encrypted devices by default. They have been such an amazing company for privacy. A lot of people lost trust in them when they came out with the proposal of the client-side scanning of photos. But then they come back with something like this, where they are fighting again on their users' behalf. And they said in the quote, if you do this, if you weaponize our software against innocent users, researchers, dissidents, activists, or journalists, Apple will give you no quarter. So it seems that they really are going to come down hard if this central company, spyware company, continues down there. So we'll see what happens out of this lawsuit, but definitely an interesting development. But let's change track here. Jen, what's going on in the metaverse?
I want to take us to the metaverse in just 1 second. Control's going to hate me because the story is already up on the screen. Naomi, I want to give you the chance to just educate our audience because you've helped me before and in the article that you were just talking about, there's something called a zero-click infections scheme. I think that's what it was called. What does that mean and why should people be aware of that?
It's terrifying. So these are things that, first of all, your software, your hardware, it's all filled with holes. And it's basically a race between the company to patch those holes and bad people to find them and exploit them. So these things are very expensive to deploy. When they're found, they don't just use them on anyone, because once it's out in the wild, people know about it, the company patches it. So you have these things called like 0-day exploits, which means it's had 0 days out in the wild, it hasn't been used there. They're very expensive to deploy. So when you're talking about the specific example you brought up, Jen, it's like a 0-click exploit. They tend to be very expensive to deploy. You don't want to waste them. So they're for like very high profile targets. But it actually is something people should be mindful of. For example, one of the really bad things about iMessage that they haven't patched is that anyone can send you a message. Generally, like for Telegram, for like other services, you can say you have to approve someone before they can send you a message. The problem with like 0-click or anything is that someone can send you a message and it infects your device without you even having to click on a link or do anything. And the problem with like Apple's open system where anyone can send you an iMessage is that you're allowing like this open like attack vector for people to just send through those exploits and affect your phone. So it's not the greatest. iMessage is pretty bad like that. That's why I encourage people to have like other phone numbers that they don't tell anyone about, so that it's more difficult for them to specifically be a target, especially if like in the crypto space, for example. But there are lots of things going on with your device. You just have to be really careful. I don't think these are something that's going to be deployed for the average person, but it is something to be aware of when you're choosing like messaging apps and what things you want available on your devices. Now that I believe iMessage is actually available for Android as well now. So you just want to think carefully about which services you actually want on your device. But let's change that topic and we'll go back to
let's go to
Metaverse.
a less scary place. Yeah, let's go to the Metaverse.
Which actually could be more frightening.
It could be more frightening. You are so right. Well, Adidas teased a relationship with the Sandbox on Twitter, and the Sandbox's native token, Sand, rallied 25%. I think this further solidifies confidence in the metaverse for investors. So I wanted to ask you guys, we spoke about JP Morgan's research report that said that Facebook was the best investment for getting exposure to the metaverse. Now we see that Adidas is buying land in the metaverse. They have coined the term the Adiverse. Not sure what's going to happen there, but it sounds fun. So Naomi, I'm gonna kick this down to you because I think the last time we spoke about the metaverse, I asked you about, getting alternative exposure to the metaverse. And here we see that Adidas announced this news and the Sand token kind of skyrocketed. So what did you think when you read the story?
I mean, it's super interesting. I sometimes wish that we would have this in the real verse, right? Like you go through the New York subway and everything is just falling apart and smells like urine and there's rats everywhere and there's garbage everywhere. And you're like, if Adidas had control over all the marketing in this, if they like bought sponsorship of that station, it would be white. You would have like beautiful shoes on display everywhere. It would be a wonderful place.
Is this what you think about when you're in the subway?
I think about that when I'm in the subway. I'd be like, oh, I'm hopping off at Coca-Cola station. Like, I think that companies would love that. And I think it would be a better user experience. So I'm actually kind of interested in this corporatization of the metaverse. I'm interested in what kind of spaces they will build out because these companies have such a vested interest in creating a polished product. And if you look at Adidas's branding, I mean, they're so polished. They're so careful with everything that they do. So I'm very interested to see what kind of an experience they'll be curating for people. people. I mean, that's not the only thing I'm excited about in the metaverse. Don't get me wrong. I don't want it to be like this space where it's all just advertising and corporations. I think it's going to be so much more than that, but I do think they will have a place. I think they will curate these places, and anyone who likes Adidas, which is a lot of people, probably going to hang out there and enjoy the experience if they understand their consumers well, which I think they do. But you're also going to have like what's most interesting about the metaverse for me is that it is this world where you also have this decentralized aspect where you can have anyone coming in and build things. There's no barriers to entry. So it's just going to be such a fascinating world. It's going to be such a mishmash of all kinds of different experiences. I'm really excited to see what that ends up looking like and what people end up building in there. So it's kind of interesting watching like Sand Token surge. I've been watching it for a while, and it just seems like, I mean, you have these individual metaverses. They're all talking about like being having interoperability. That's the word I'm looking for. Like potentially having interoperability down the line. We're not there yet. So instead we've got like these silos, these walled gardens of this is my metaverse. Come build in my space. Well, I've got like Facebook verse. Come build in my space. And so it will be interesting when that real fluidity starts to occur, like we've seen in the DeFi space with those, money Lego blocks, and we have all this integration. Definitely here for what that next iteration will look like. But I'll throw it to you, Will, for your thoughts.
I have a really quick question, and that goes back to Jen's top of the segment thought. You said that the like sand token pumping is good for investments in the long term of the metaverse, which seems like dubious. I feel like this could be like, I feel like metaverse tokens could be this year's ICOs. Think like, or this season's ICOs in a lot of ways. And that doesn't mean that a lot of ICOs didn't perform well over like a longer time horizon. Like some tokens that were issued in 2018 are doing quite well now, and their projects are back on their feet. Metaverse, just there isn't much there. If you look at some of these games, if you go into them, like nothing much is built out. And I'm really interested to look at user numbers and see like over the history of it, if there is going to be like some validity to investing in it right now and seeing what the token performance is in like 5 years or so.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm seeing all these rallies as well. And each time I'm like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to like get involved with something in the metaverse, but that's already rallied. So I'll just, I'll hang on for a bit. And then you see like another announcement and it rallies more. I'm like, shit, all right. Well, I mean, it'll come down now because
this
now
is what we call FOMO, Naomi.
Yeah, it just keeps going on. I got FOMO.
Make investments based on FOMO.
Don't jump into it.
Yeah. This is what we call FOMO.
No, you're right. I haven't yet, but it's definitely on my radar.
600% since Facebook. That's nuts.
Oh,
it says 600%.
I know, it is crazy.
Announcement.
I want to say, when I was at NFT NYC, there was just general disdain towards Zuckerberg and the Facebook metaverse. And I had the opportunity, I spoke to the Sandbox COO, Sebastian Bourget, I believe his name is. And they had just announced that they raised a $93 million Series B. And I know I'm such a nerd. I like took notes while he was talking just in case we had an opportunity like this. So he said that the money that they raised, he said that they're positioning the Sandbox as an alternative to what the closed communities are doing. They're no different than what they used to be before. So he's trying to, I guess, tell people that Facebook is no different than what it was before. And that's not the real metaverse. And I just wonder if we can say that right now because we don't really know what Facebook's plans are for the metaverse.
Well, we can definitely ask him more questions on Monday. He will be coming on the show on First Mover.
Wow, so, look at that transition.
No, Sebastian. He's coming on First Mover. But we can definitely dig into that, get more information about what he means by that. Maybe we can have Christine push back a little if she disagrees with that. I'd be interested in that discussion. But let's wrap that up there, guys. It's Thanksgiving and we're all going to go off and have our tofurkey and it's going to be wonderful. And we're going to I have a little bit of PTSD. It takes me back to like 2013 when you had like Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Coinbase eliminating all fees on their website. Everyone's like FOMOing into crypto and then it crashed to like $200 for years. And I was like, shit. Be more careful with investments.
Hopefully that doesn't happen again. Hopefully that doesn't happen again.
And so just be careful. weird things happen around Thanksgiving. So just go and enjoy yourselves, have fun, and we will see you back here on Monday. But if you guys wanted to stick around, we do have All About Bitcoin at 3 p.m. And then we're going to be dark for a couple of days and back again with everything that you know and love Monday. Thank you guys for being here. It's awesome to see you guys chatting in the chat. Will, someone says that they would like to see you wear your glasses next time because they really like them. It was tube that.
So many Will fans. I can't take it. Everyone loves Will. What's up with that?
We're going to wrap this up. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you Monday.